Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Story 1. On the morning of April Fool's Day 2013, Huang Yang, a medical research student at Fudan University in China, woke up and poured a glass of water from the water dispenser into his usual cup. However, as soon as he took a sip, he felt something was wrong. Huang Yang quickly spat out the water, coughing violently and feeling intensely nauseous, as if his body was trying to expel all the water he had just drunk. Remembering that this water dispenser had been purchased 2 weeks ago, Huang Yang thought that perhaps the water had gone bad due to being left for too long and had developed an odor. Without much thought, he took the water dispenser to clean it, but he couldn't have known that from that moment, the countdown to his life had begun. After cleaning the water dispenser, Huang Yang went to the university library to study. After just an hour, he began to feel increasingly unwell, experiencing nausea, vomiting, and a high fever. By noon, his condition had worsened to the point where Huang Yang had to call 2 friends to take him to the hospital. After receiving intravenous fluids and returning to the dormitory at 6 p.m., Huang Yang still showed no signs of improvement. He could only lie in bed and try to rest. The next day, the vomiting persisted and his body began to show worrying signs of swelling. Through a series of tests, doctors discovered that his platelet count was rapidly decreasing and his liver function was also abnormal. That evening, Huang Yang's condition quickly deteriorated, forcing doctors to transfer him to intensive care. His father, Huang Guozhong, received the terrible news and immediately traveled from Sichuan to Shanghai. When he saw his son lying motionless on the hospital bed, he nearly collapsed at the heartbreaking sight. In the following days, Huang Yang's illness progressed at an alarming rate. His lungs gradually became fibrotic, making it impossible for him to breathe on his own. By April 6th, he began to have nosebleeds, and his consciousness became increasingly hazy. The intense pain caused Huang Yang to lose control of his actions. He thrashed about wildly and screamed in agony. Even when 2 or 3 medical staff tried to restrain him, they couldn't control the situation. Eventually, they had to use restraints to secure him to the bed, ensuring safety for both him and those around him. Shortly after, Huang Yang fell into a deep coma. His entire body was swollen, with many bruises visible under the skin. His face and body were so distorted that they were almost unrecognizable compared to his original appearance. Standing by the hospital bed, family members and doctors could only look at Huang Yang with helpless and sorrowful eyes. The doctors and family members were extremely worried, constantly wondering what could have caused this illness. Mr. Huang couldn't understand why his son, who had been perfectly healthy, had suddenly become like this. On the first night in Shanghai, Mr. Huang stayed temporarily in his son's dormitory. There, he met a roommate who introduced himself as being close to Huang Yang, Lin Senhio. This young man, though quiet, was very attentive to Huang Yang's father. He patiently showed Mr. Huang which personal belongings belonged to his son. Throughout Huang Yang's hospitalization, Senhio visited 3 times, showing concern for his roommate. However, it wasn't until the 15th that Huang Guoxiang learned a horrifying truth. Lin Senhio, the seemingly close roommate, was actually the perpetrator who had harmed his son's life. On April 16th, in the midst of excruciating pain and the medical team's helplessness, Huang Yang passed away. Perhaps until his last moment, he still didn't understand the real cause behind his mysterious illness. This question also became a haunting obsession, an unsolved mystery in the mind of the grieving father. To better understand the chain of events leading to this tragedy, let's go back in time to the day before the incident occurred. On Sunday afternoon, March 31st, 2013, the Fonglin campus of Fudan University maintained its usual peaceful atmosphere. No one could have imagined that in this tranquil setting, a dark plan was taking shape. Lin Senhio, a graduate student from the class of 2010 at the medical school, appeared in the security camera footage of the school. In his hand was a yellow plastic bag. Upon returning to the dormitory, Senhio carefully locked the door. He was preparing to carry out a plan, or more precisely, as he would later claim, an April Fool's Day prank for his roommate Huang Yang. In that yellow plastic bag, Lin Senhio had concealed a bottle of poison and a syringe. All of these items had been secretly taken from the school's laboratory. The bottle contained 52 milliliters of N-nitrosodimethylamine, hereafter referred to as N2. This was not an ordinary chemical, but an extremely potent poison. The solution was yellow and emitted a pungent ammonia-like odor. Just about 3 milliliters could be enough to kill an adult. The dormitory room was shared by 3 people, Lin Senhyo, Huang Yang, and someone named Gay Junkie. However, Gay Junkie, being a Shanghai native and newly married, rarely stayed at the dormitory. Initially, Senhyo planned to pour 2 nira directly into Huang Yang's cup. But he quickly realized that the yellow liquid would be too noticeable in the white cup. Therefore, he decided to pour all the N2 into the water dispenser in the room. But when he lifted the dispenser, he discovered he couldn't operate it with one hand, so he set it back down. He used one hand to tilt the water dispenser to one side, while the other hand held the bottle, allowing the pure N2 to slowly flow in through the open groove. He then injected an additional 2 milliliters from the syringe. When he noticed a few drops splashing onto the edge of the dispenser, he quickly rinsed it with mineral water to erase the traces. After completing everything, Senhyo disposed of the clear plastic bag containing the syringe in the trash can on the 4th floor stairway of the dormitory. He then threw the yellow medical waste bag containing the empty bottle into the trash can next to the phone booth at Building 2 of the lecture hall. This was also where he usually called home to his parents. From the moment he completed the poisoning act, Lin Senhyo entered a complex psychological state, beginning to deceive himself. Just an hour after this horrifying action, perhaps due to rising feelings of guilt or anxiety, he felt uneasy and turned to internet search engines looking up information related to N2. When he read about liver damage caused by N2, Lin Senhyo quickly skimmed through and closed the webpage. For serious terms like potentially fatal, he selectively ignored them. The question arises, why would a medical graduate student like Lin Senhyo need to search for this information? Didn't he know about the toxicity of N2? Of course that wasn't the case. In fact, with his medical knowledge background, Senhyo surely understood the dangers of this substance. As early as 2011, he had conducted experiments on mice using N2 and even wrote all the experimental data in his thesis, published in a journal. The information search might have been an unconscious effort to seek confirmation that his actions might not be as serious as he thought, or to find ways to justify his behavior. Senhyo continued the process of self-deception by selectively filtering information, focusing only on less serious content, and ignoring severe warnings on websites. He convinced himself that the strong smell of N2 would make Huang Yang suspicious, and asked if someone had put something in the water. Senhyo even relied on his previous experimental results on mice to comfort himself, reasoning that even if Huang Yang drank a small amount, it might not cause serious harm. He rationalized, in previous experiments, most mice didn't die after exposure to this substance, and some even became healthier after a while. With these thoughts, he decided not to think about the consequences anymore, simply thinking, let's just see what happens. Unfortunately, things didn't unfold as Senhyo had predicted. On the morning of April 1st, Huang Yang drank the water without any suspicion. At that time, Senhyo pretended to be asleep, lying still, not daring to move, listening to the sound of his roommate stirring his cup, and then coughing after drinking the water. While Huang Yang was washing the water dispenser, Senhyo's phone suddenly rang. It was a classmate calling to remind him about getting their medical practice certificates. Receiving this call, Senhyo quickly jumped out of bed and hurriedly left the dormitory. This action could have stemmed from 2 motives. One was to go get the certificate as planned, and the other was to avoid facing Huang Yang and any potential questions. To ensure he wouldn't run into Huang Yang, Senhyo cautiously waited until he was certain his roommate had left the dormitory before returning. The next day at noon, Lin Senhyo returned to the dormitory. At that time, was interning at the ultrasound department of Zhongshan Hospital and usually stayed at the hospital during lunchtime. But today he came back to see if Huang Yang would ask him about any issues with the water. However, Huang Yang didn't suspect him at all. As Huang Yang's health condition worsened, he told Senhyo that he thought he might have acute gastric perforation and asked his roommate to help check. Around 5 p.m., Senhyo performed an ultrasound on Huang Yang. After the examination, he reported that there was nothing wrong with the stomach. However, perhaps due to a surge of guilt, Senhyo unexpectedly added that the liver was also fine. Immediately realizing he had slipped up by mentioning the liver, he quickly changed the subject. Fortunately for him, neither Huang Yang nor the friend accompanying him noticed this unusual detail. After that, Huang Yang's condition rapidly deteriorated, Based on initial diagnoses, doctors believed he might have been poisoned, leading to liver damage. But because the cause was unclear, it was difficult to provide proper treatment. Huang Yang's brother and treating physician both felt that this case was unusual. After discussion, they sent samples of water, urine, and blood to the forensic center for testing, hoping to find the cause. 2 days later, they even brought some of Huang Yang's personal items for testing, including some food he had eaten and his drinking cup. But both tests revealed nothing unusual. After all, N2 is not a common poison. Who would think to compare with it? When he saw that the test results didn't detect any abnormalities, Lin Senhyo felt surprised and silently wondered why the poison wasn't detected. Although aware that Huang Yang was gradually approaching death, Sun Hyo chose to remain silent, not revealing the truth. He visited Huang Yang in the hospital 3 times, each time appearing very calm. The purpose of these visits was not out of sympathy or remorse, but to observe whether Huang Yang's condition was improving. Sun Hyo consoled himself that Huang Yang had only consumed a small amount of poison and might recover in the next examination. However, in the eyes of Huang Yang's parents, Senhyo's behavior carried a completely different meaning. They viewed his visits as if a scientist was observing his experimental subject. Good Junkie, Huang Yang's other roommate, was also constantly worried and searching for the cause of the illness. He had looked through Huang Yang's medical records and found the symptoms of acute liver failure familiar. On the evening of April 8th, Junkie suddenly remembered that Senhyo had once mentioned using a substance that could cause liver damage in organisms. Could Huang Yang have accidentally come into contact with it? After searching the database, he discovered the name of the substance. It was already past 10 p.m., but Junkie immediately called Huang Yang's brother, suggesting a thorough investigation into the N2 substance. However, their conversation was interrupted by Senhyo's return. Junkie was concerned that if Senhyo knew he was investigating the substance that he had used, it might cause unnecessary tension between friends. With this in mind, he quickly ended the call and switched to texting to avoid drawing attention. On April 9th, following Junkie's suggestion, N2 was indeed detected in Huang Yang's cup, water dispenser, and urine. Immediately, Junkie worried that Senhyo might become a suspect. But very soon after, Junkie was cleared of suspicion. When faced with police questioning, Senhyo remained silent about the truth. It wasn't until he was summoned for criminal investigation for the second time that he slowly revealed the truth. During the interrogation, Senhyo's confession gradually revealed the horrifying truth. Initially, he tried to cover up by claiming he only used formaldehyde, a less dangerous poison. Later, perhaps due to the pressure of the interrogation, he changed his statement, saying he had used a mixture of formaldehyde and N2, but only a small amount of 2 milliliters from the syringe. However, after enduring about 12 hours of continuous interrogation pressure, Senhyo finally couldn't maintain his initial statement. He confessed the terrifying truth. In addition to the 2 milliliters from the syringe, he had poured another 52 milliliters of pure nitrogen, 2, into Huang Yang's drinking water. The amount of poison Sun Hyo used was not only enough to cause death, but exceeded the lethal threshold by 20 to 30 times. At this point, many people would wonder if Lin Sun Hyo and Huang Yang had some deep-seated hatred that led to such a cruel act causing the other to die so painfully. What infuriated people was Senhyo's answer that they had no grudges or enmity. His reason for doing this was simply to play a prank on the other, wanting to make the somewhat arrogant Huang Yang experience a bit of suffering. This reason sounds illogical and hard to accept. After all, he was a medical graduate student. How could he not have foreseen such consequences? So where did all of this stem from? Lin Senhyo was born in 1986 in Shantou City, Guangdong Province. He was the 3rd child in the family, with 2 older sisters, a younger brother, and a younger sister. His father previously worked at a garment factory, but lost his job when the factory went bankrupt when he was over 50 years old. His mother often pulled a cart to collect recyclables to supplement the family's expenses. Later, she suffered a heart attack and lost her ability to work. A few years later, the family opened a small grocery store to make ends meet. However, the family of 7 still lived quite a difficult life. From a young age, Senhyo showed excellent academic abilities, becoming the hope and pride of his parents. To improve the family's difficult circumstances, Senhyo made unceasing efforts in his studies. The results of these efforts were rewarded when he excellently passed the entrance exam to Sun Yat-sen University, one of China's top universities. with an impressive score of 680. Not stopping there, Senhyo continued to prove his ability. When he was directly admitted to the graduate program at Fudan University to pursue a medical specialty, Senhyo was very frugal in his life. During his spare time, he often took on many tutoring jobs and sent all the money he earned back home. Part of it went towards tuition for his younger siblings and part for his mother's medical treatment. Being placed under high expectations in a poor family made him very ambitious, but also extremely sensitive and intolerant of ridicule. A student from a poor family had to rely on his own efforts to help improve the living conditions of the entire family. To travel from his hometown to Shanghai for study, Senhyo had to take a small bus for 40 minutes to the center of Shantou City, then travel 4 hours by coach to Xiamen, and finally buy a hard-seat train ticket for over 10 hours to reach Shanghai. During his undergraduate years, he studied very diligently. When in graduate school, Senhyo published 8 high-quality papers in domestic core journals. Additionally, he was the vice president of the student union, actively participating in public welfare activities. It can be said that even at Fudan University, a place gathering many talents, Senhyo was not inferior to anyone. In 2013, the school even nominated him for doctoral studies. But considering his family's actual circumstances, to be able to start working and earning money sooner, he declined this opportunity and went to intern at Zhongshan Hospital affiliated with Fudan University. If nothing had happened, he would soon have become a doctor in the ultrasound department. Senhyo had an educational background from a top university and was in a very promising field. A bright future was opening up in the direction he had hoped for until another young man moved into the same dormitory room, Huang Yang. Huang Yang was from Sichuan province with a family background that had many similarities to Senhyo's. His family's life also went through difficulties when his father lost his job at a state-owned enterprise. To maintain their livelihood, Huang Yang's father had to switch to managing dormitories at a high school, a job with a modest but stable salary. Additionally, Huang Yang's mother suffered from gallstones in the bile duct, which was also the motivation driving him to pursue a medical career. Both Huang Yang and Senhyo were talented and filial in the eyes of others. But unlike Senhyo, Huang Yang was an only child during his 8 years of study because his parents didn't want to add any burden on their son. They didn't allow him to send any money home. Therefore, Huang Yang used his part-time job earnings and scholarship money to improve his life, buying a phone and a down jacket for his parents, and even paying off the 300,000 yuan, approximately $46,000, surgery fee for his mother. Huang Yang enjoyed traveling, watching movies, and often insisted on paying when going out with friends. His personality was quite cheerful and outgoing. During his graduate studies, he didn't publish any papers, but it was said that this was simply because he didn't place much importance on it. Before the incident occurred, he had just achieved the highest score in the otolaryngology department exam and won the opportunity to directly pursue a PhD. Although both came from ordinary families, Huang Yang often displayed a sense of superiority, liking to boast about his abilities. When talking, he didn't pay much attention to others, sometimes unintentionally hurting others without realizing it. He had repeatedly evaluated Senhyo in a joking manner, bluntly saying that he was stingy and didn't know how to enjoy life. Sometimes he would even pat Senhyo on the shoulder and call him a country bumpkin. For male students, this might just be a form of teasing. Huang Yang didn't consider it mockery, perhaps thinking he and Senhyo had a good enough relationship to joke like that. As for Senhyo, when faced with these teases, he mostly didn't respond and outwardly showed no emotion. But in reality, this dissatisfaction had been accumulating in his heart for a long time and was difficult to dissipate. In February 2013, Senhyo and Huang Yang had a disagreement about the cost of the water purifier. Senhyo believed that he didn't drink much water daily, as he always had drinking water in the laboratory, library, and hospital, so he proposed not to pay for the water and would buy his own water later. But Huang Yang immediately told Gay Junkie that from now on, the two of them would pay for the water. On the night before April 1st, 2013, Huang Yang excitedly told some other friends that April Fool's Day was coming, and he had an idea to prank someone. He then told a joke about how soaking feet in hot water would make people wet the bed. He even patted the shoulder of a friend standing next to Senhyo. This friend was close to Senhyo. When seeing Huang Yang's smug expression, Senhyo felt very uncomfortable inside. He thought, "You want to prank others, so let me prank you first, that's fair." Therefore, The next day he prepared this deadly prank. As for why he thought of poisoning in this way, Senhyo recalled, he had once heard that someone at a certain university had used thallium to poison their roommate, and to this day hadn't been discovered. Later, he learned through the press that the university was Tsinghua University, and the victim's name was Zhu Ling. At the initial trial, Senhyo displayed an extremely cold and emotionless exterior. Throughout the trial, he never once looked towards his father sitting in the audience area. Even when the judge pronounced the death sentence and his father, disagreeing with the verdict, shouted loudly for an appeal, Senhyo maintained a face that showed no emotion. This attitude of Senhyo made many people present in the court shudder at his frightening coldness. However, those close to Lin Senhyo, such as his parents, teachers, and friends, had a completely different view. In their eyes, Lin Senhyo's image was still that of an outstanding student with a progressive spirit. They couldn't link the Senhyo they knew with the 3 words murderer. His father said, "My son is not a cold-hearted person. His personality has always been like that. No matter how painful things get, he doesn't show it outwardly." Years ago, when his mother had a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital, many relatives were heartbroken and in tears, but Lin Senhyo didn't show much emotion. He was like a doctor instructing me, "Mom might have to take medication for life. I'll take on a few more tutoring jobs, so Mom won't have to collect recyclables anymore." In an interview with a reporter, Senhyo's elementary school teacher burst into tears, saying that when she heard the news, she couldn't sleep for several nights. His high school teacher evaluated him as outwardly cold, but warm inside, with a sense of loyalty and righteousness. A year after graduating from middle school, he returned home to Organiza for his classmates to see their teachers, but he himself quietly went last. In the eyes of his classmates, although Senhyo had an introverted personality, they could all recognize through many small actions that he was a warm person. For example, he would help his roommates fill hot water or tidy up their desks without saying anything. In 2008, when the Wenchuan earthquake occurred, Lin Senhyo donated 800 yuan at once, equivalent to his living expenses for 2 months. This money was originally what he had saved to send home. Regarding the medical profession, Lin Senhyo also had a noble and compassionate heart. When interning at Zhongshan Hospital, there were often patients in a hurry to get their report results near the end of the lunch break, and they would offer him money for help. But Senhyo always firmly returned the money, saying that these funds should be used for the patients. He once wrote on "Sometimes I really hate this medical profession, because we can't help patients to the end when they need help." When facing patients with unstable moods, Senhyo wrote, "When we're busy or in a bad mood, we often don't pay attention to patients' feelings, easily causing misunderstandings. Communication is an effective method. It's a pity that a future doctor with such a noble aspiration to save lives and help people couldn't apply communication skills to resolve conflicts with his classmate." Before the appeal hearing, Senhyo had handwritten an apology letter to send to Huang Yang's parents, but they refused to accept it. Senhyo's father, heartbroken at the thought of losing his son, demanded a change of lawyer to plead not guilty, but son Hyo firmly disagreed. He wrote a letter to his father saying, "There's a Chinese saying, truth speaks louder than eloquence. In the face of truth, no matter how well one speaks, it's useless. I did indeed poison Huang Yong. I can only plead guilty, and must plead guilty." Subsequently, 177 Fudan University students also sent a joint letter to the Shanghai High People's Court, requesting that Lin Senhyo be given a chance to live so that he could reform and make amends, and perhaps later care for Huang Yang's parents in his stead. During the appeal hearing, Senhyo still maintained that he had no intention to kill, and that the poisoning was just an April Fool's Day prank. But when the judge asked where the humor lay in this action if it was indeed a prank, Senhyo was unable to answer. From a criminal psychology perspective, the ability to use such a cruel method to kill someone without a clear motive can only indicate a subjective attitude that disregards the victim's life, viewing this behavior as a joke or a game. In the end, the court believed that Lin Senhyo essentially showed no intention of repentance, could not be forgiven by the victim's family, and there was no reason not to impose the death penalty. For Lin Senhyo, this result meant he had to pay for a life with his own life, but he still owed a debt to his roommate's parents. After the sentencing, Lin Senhyo finally cried. He looked at Huang Yang's parents with a pained face, hoping they could let go of their hatred and live healthily and positively from now on. On December 11, 2015, Lin Senhyo met his family for the last time and was subsequently executed. His life ended at the age of 29. Story 2. In 2002, a mysterious case unfolded in Gyeongju, South Korea, when a woman reported her sister, Park Yoon-kyung, missing to the police. What made the case particularly intriguing was that before her disappearance, Park had left a cryptic message suggesting she was abandoning her current life to go somewhere far away where no one could find her. Initially, the police treated it as a typical runaway case. However, as their investigation deepened, they uncovered increasingly disturbing details, especially concerning the involvement of a mysterious fortune teller. Born in the early 1980s in Jeonju, Park Yoon-kyung had led a relatively peaceful life until her marriage ended in divorce at age 30. After that, she chose to live independently, maintaining minimal contact with her family, except for occasional phone calls to check on her mother. She had one brother and two sisters. Park was notably private, maintaining virtually no social media presence or public photos of herself. Established financial independence, opened an indoor golf training facility. Thanks to the growing popularity of golf in South Korea, her business proved quite successful. While not wealthy, the income from her golf facility allowed her to maintain a comfortable upper-middle-class lifestyle. Despite her failed marriage, Park hadn't given up hope of finding new happiness. Fate seemed to intervene when John Suhai, a man born in 1979, entered her life. Their relationship began naturally when Jean became a regular customer at Park's golf facility. Through frequent golf sessions, they gradually started talking and eventually began going out for meals and coffee together. Jean made no secret of his special interest in Park. However, contrary to his enthusiasm, Park remained rather indifferent. She sensed that Jean wasn't her type and rejected his romantic advances. Yet her rejection didn't discourage Jean, who continued pursuing her persistently, despite their ambiguous relationship status. One day, while busy at her golf facility, received a strange text message from an unknown number. It read, "Your mother's illness isn't in her lungs, but in her liver. Remember to tell her to seek treatment at a different hospital. I have prayed for her, and you should light incense at home. When I arrive in Pohang, I'll message you." Though she didn't know the sender, Park could guess from the message's content that the intended recipient's mother was seriously ill. Thinking it was simply a wrong number, she politely replied, "I believe you have the wrong number." The stranger quickly responded with a friendly tone, "Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for letting me know. You must be a kind person. Good fortune will surely come your way." After reading these messages, Park became curious about how the stranger knew she was a woman. Intrigued, she asked, "How did you know I'm a woman?" The response she received was unexpected. "I'm a fortune teller who helps people through divination and prayers. Through my readings, I can see that you're a kind-hearted woman. If you ever need help with anything, just let me know. I'll assist you free of charge." In Korean culture, consulting fortune tellers is a common practice, particularly popular among women. Therefore, it's understandable that Park felt fortunate to have seemingly stumbled upon a benevolent fortune teller through this chance text exchange. It appeared to be a serendipitous encounter. Without hesitation, shared her name and birth date with the fortune teller. Soon after, she received a response. "Your path in love has not been smooth. You've experienced one failed marriage. Currently, someone is pursuing you, but you remain hesitant. Let me tell you this, don't hesitate anymore. Accept his feelings. He will bring you good fortune." What astonished Park was that the fortune teller accurately described the physical appearance of her pursuer. A man who matched Jin's description perfectly. To further test this mysterious fortune teller's abilities, Park asked several more questions. Once again, she was amazed by the precision of each answer. These experiences gradually led Park to place complete trust in the fortune teller, and consequently, she began opening her heart to Jin. Events unfolded exactly as the fortune teller had predicted. Park and Jin's relationship developed rapidly, and soon she decided to move in with him. Life seemed to be moving in a positive direction until tragedy struck. Park's mother passed away in November 2021. During the somber atmosphere of the funeral, there was an emotional moment when Park reunited with her brother and two sisters after 7 years apart. The four siblings embraced, tears flowing, as past misunderstandings and resentments seemed to dissolve in this sacred moment of reunion. Their family bonds grew stronger than ever before. Throughout this time, Jin remained by Park's side, helping with all the funeral arrangements. He presented himself as a thoughtful, considerate man, and quickly won the approval of Park's entire family. Jin introduced himself as the owner of a successful tattoo parlor with a comfortable financial status. He consistently demonstrated love and special attention toward Park, earning endless praise from everyone around them. To Park's three siblings, Gene seemed like the ideal brother-in-law, kind, genuine, and approachable. Step by step, Gene became an indispensable part of the Park family, frequently visiting and naturally blending in as a family member. Park often brought him to visit her father and attend family gatherings. Though they weren't officially married, in the minds of her three sisters, Gene was already their brother-in-law. To everyone around them, Park and Gene appeared to be the perfect couple. Gene's presence brought a fresh energy and happiness to the entire family. However, family members began noticing unusual changes in Park. She suddenly decided to undergo plastic surgery to create dimples in her cheeks and got numerous tattoos, actions completely contrary to her traditional nature. Previously known for her conservative lifestyle, these bold changes surprised everyone. Though concerned, no one dared to question Park directly. They simply assumed these changes were influenced by Jin's profession as a tattoo artist. The family's happiness seemed destined to last forever, but fate had other plans. Just 6 months later, an unexpected tragedy struck, plunging the family into crisis. In May 2022, Gene suddenly approached Park's two sisters with a grief-stricken face. Through tears, he made a shocking accusation. "Your sister has been unfaithful. She's taken $3.2 million of my money and disappeared. I don't know where she is. Please help me find her." The two sisters were stunned by this devastating news. They broke down crying, repeatedly apologizing to Gene, and begging for his forgiveness for their sister's actions. They promised to help search for her. However, what they hadn't told Gene was that a few days earlier, the second sister had received a mysterious text from Park. In the message, their sister revealed her plan to flee with Jin's money. The text read, "I've decided to leave and take brother-in-law's money. I'm going somewhere far away where no one can find me. I want you to come with me." Shocked by this mysterious message, the sister quickly replied, "Where are you? Everyone's looking for you." Park's response was brief. "I'm in Yesu with another man. I'm not coming back." After this message, Park seemed to vanish completely, leaving no trace of communication. Deeply concerned for their sister's safety, the two sisters discussed the situation and decided to contact the police. However, when Gene heard about this plan, he strongly objected, saying, "I don't want to make this public. I just want to find her and bring her back." Jin's strange reaction raised suspicions in Park's brother-in-law's mind. How could someone remain so calm after losing $3.2 million? More notably, Gene didn't seem concerned about Park's safety at all. These suspicious circumstances prompted the second sister, following her husband's advice, to report the case to the police. At the station, she provided a detailed account of her sister's relationship with Gene Suhi to the investigators. Immediately after receiving the report, police contacted Gene Suhi for questioning. However, an unexpected development occurred. When asked to present identification, Gene provided false information. This action immediately raised red flags among the investigation team. They couldn't help but wonder, why would someone seeking to recover such a large sum of money need to hide his true identity? What was Gene trying to conceal? As the investigation deepened, police uncovered more suspicious details. Background checks revealed that Gene Suhi had a criminal record. This truth stood in stark contrast to the image of the kind, moral man he had carefully cultivated in the eyes of Park's family. With mounting suspicions, police quickly obtained a warrant to search Jin's home and car. The search yielded a crucial discovery. Park's phone was found in Jin's house. Faced with this undeniable evidence, Gene had no choice but to confess his horrific crime. According to his confession, a few days earlier during an argument with Park, Gene had lost control of his anger and strangled her until she stopped breathing. After the murder, he had stuffed her body into a suitcase and hidden it in an abandoned house in the suburbs. To misdirect the investigation, Gene had cleverly used the victim's phone to send messages to her family, creating a false narrative about Park stealing money and running away with it. The truth revealed the elaborate scheme Gene had meticulously planned, transforming a brutal murder into a story of infidelity and theft. Following Jin's directions, police finally discovered Park's body. The revelation dealt a devastating blow to the Park family. They couldn't believe that the man they had welcomed as their gentle, kind brother-in-law was actually a cold-blooded murderer who had ruthlessly killed their beloved sister. In their profound grief, the family demanded that police pursue the harshest possible legal consequences against Gene. As the investigation expanded, police uncovered another significant detail. Had maintained regular contact with a mysterious fortune teller for several years. Notably, this same fortune teller had influenced major decisions in Park's life, encouraging her relationship with Jean, suggesting plastic surgery, and recommending tattoos. The fortune teller had even specified exact times and locations for Park to meet with Jean. While fortune telling is common in South Korea, this level of involvement raised serious concerns. In June 2022, just as police were finalizing the case file for the prosecutor's office, a startling new witness emerged. Kim Soo-young, a successful 40-year-old businesswoman with circumstances similar to Park's, came forward. Like Park, Kim had divorced at 30 and was living independently. Kim's decision to contact police came after watching a news report about Jin's case. She was shocked to recognize the murderer as the man she had dated for years earlier. Unable to believe that someone she had known could be capable of murder, rushed to the police station to verify the information. When the truth was confirmed, Kim decided to share her own story, one that bore striking similarities to Park's experience. 6 years earlier, while Kim was focusing on her career, both she and Jean were single and began meeting regularly. However, before their relationship started, Kim had received a mysterious text from an unknown number, following the exact same pattern as Park's experience. Thinking it was a wrong number, Kim had politely replied, just as Park had done. She received the same kind of friendly response, followed by an introduction from someone claiming to be a fortune teller who offered free assistance. From this chance conversation, they began regular text exchanges, a scenario eerily similar to how Park had been lured into the trap. Following the fortune teller's advice, Kim had opened her heart to Jean. During their time together, she felt incredibly happy and believed she had found her soulmate. Her feelings grew so deep that she began considering marriage. She regularly shared her joy with the fortune teller, whom she trusted and frequently consulted for advice during difficult times. However, their seemingly perfect romance took a bizarre turn. During one of their outings, Jean suddenly doubled over, clutching his stomach, his face contorted in pain. Witnessing this, Kim panicked. Upon returning home, she frantically messaged the fortune teller about the incident, seeking guidance. The fortune teller's response was shocking. Must break up with Jean immediately, or she would lose her life. Despite this warning, Kim's deep love for Jean prevented her from ending the relationship. Each time they met, Jean would repeat this performance of pain, causing Kim increasing anxiety. Then one day, like a leaf in the wind, Jean vanished without a word of goodbye. No one had heard from him since. After Jin's disappearance, Kim had desperately searched for him by every possible means. She even reached out to the fortune teller for help, but received a cold response. Your fate with him is over. Stop looking for him. For 4 long years, Jin's memory had lingered in Kim's mind. That's why she was especially shocked to discover that the man she had once loved was actually a brutal murderer. In Kim's memory, Jean had been gentle and kind, an image completely contradicting the cold-blooded killer in the news. Notably, Kim's impression of Jean matched perfectly with how Park's family had viewed him. These details revealed Jean Soo. He is an extremely cunning individual who had masterfully crafted a perfect facade to deceive those around him. Police investigation further revealed that both Park and Kim had been in contact with the same fortune teller, the one who had encouraged both women to date Jean. This discovery intensified police suspicions and led them to focus more closely on the mysterious fortune teller's identity. During the investigation, an unexpected lead emerged from the prison where Jean was being held. A woman surnamed Yun had visited him and provided him with $8,000 for personal expenses. Police quickly identified this woman, who confessed to being Jin's lover for several years, though they had no plans for marriage. Like the others, she claimed a fortune teller had predicted she would find good fortune by dating Jean. Indeed, her business had flourished during their relationship, making her wealthy enough to lease a luxury car worth $2,500 monthly for Jin's use. Police discovered that Ms. Yun bore a striking resemblance to Park, the murder victim. This was no coincidence, as she too had undergone plastic surgery at the fortune teller's suggestion. By now, police had identified 3 victims with intertwining stories, all connected to a single fortune teller. The critical question remained, who was really behind the fortune teller's mask? In their effort to uncover the truth, police approached Kim for the fortune teller's address. However, Kim could only shake her head. She explained that she had never visited the fortune teller's home, as he had warned it would bring bad luck. The mystery surrounding this figure only strengthened investigators' determination to uncover his true identity. The investigation took a dramatic turn when Park's family provided crucial new information. Park's third sister came forward to the police with a disturbing account. She revealed that she too had been in contact with the fortune teller months earlier and had regularly exchanged messages with him. Most alarmingly, just weeks before Park's murder, the fortune teller had made an ominous suggestion. She should divorce her husband and move in with Jean to receive good fortune. The fortune teller had even threatened that if she didn't comply, her husband would die. These menacing prophecies had thrown her into such emotional turmoil that she had contemplated suicide. Through analysis of telecommunications data, police made a startling discovery. Had been using two different phone numbers. While one was known to everyone, the other was completely new to the investigation. Curiously, the call history on this second phone showed only calls to Park's original number. This finding prompted police to conduct a second thorough search of both Park and Jin's residence and vehicles. During the search, they found the second phone with its new number in the couple's home. Most significantly, they discovered a message sent to Park on the day her disappearance. The message read, "Buy 2 large suitcases, then go to sleep and sleep deeply. In your dream, you will see Buddha and your mother. When you wake up, you will find lots of money in the 2 suitcases." This mysterious message undoubtedly came from the fortune teller. While investigating the fortune teller's phone numbers, police made a breakthrough discovery. All the numbers were connected to customers who had visited Jin's tattoo parlor. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Jean Sui finally confessed that he had been the fortune teller in all 3 women's stories. He had cleverly exploited his position as a tattoo parlor owner to collect personal information from his customers. Using this information, he registered multiple phone numbers, creating a perfect cover for his fake fortune teller persona. Under the guise of a fortune teller, Jean had skillfully manipulated the psychology of vulnerable single women. He not only deceived them emotionally and financially, but also satisfied his own dark desires. This revealed a meticulously planned scheme, demonstrating the nature of a calculating and cruel con artist. The investigation continued to yield new findings when police discovered compromising photos of 2 other women on Jin's computer. Despite being confronted with this evidence, he stubbornly maintained his silence, refusing to reveal any information about these victims' identities. When questioned about his motive for killing Park Yun-kyung, Jean tried to claim it was an unplanned accident. However, police quickly dismissed this explanation with compelling evidence. The key proof lay in the 2 suitcases found at the crime scene. They perfectly matched the instructions Jean had given Park in his role as the fortune teller before the murder. The Park family was outraged by Jin's horrific crimes. They proposed a terrifying theory about his motives, that killing Park wasn't just murder, but part of a scheme to gain control over her younger sister. This suspicion gained credibility considering how Jean had forced his girlfriend, Ms. Yun, to undergo plastic surgery to look exactly like Park. He may have planned to use this physical similarity to continue deceiving people and cover up his crime. Jean clearly understood that only after Park's disappearance would her sister be willing to move in with him without suspicion. In November 2022, after trial proceedings, the court sentenced Jean Sui to life imprisonment for his crimes. However, he immediately appealed the verdict. In February 2023, the appeals court reduced his sentence to 35 years in prison, with the additional requirement that he wear an electronic monitoring device for 15 years after his release. This new ruling sparked intense protests from the victim's family. In their grief and anger, they argued that 35 years was far too lenient for Jin's horrific crimes. To them, someone who had meticulously planned, deceived, and brutally murdered their loved one deserved a much harsher sentence. In this case, Jean Sui had exploited the kindness and trust of women to execute his sophisticated fraud. He skillfully manipulated his victims' vulnerabilities and compassion, leading them into his trap without their awareness. His method of deception was so sophisticated that even cautious and vigilant individuals would have struggled to detect it. Perhaps most disturbing was how, even after recognizing the true nature of their deceiver, many victims remained psychologically entrapped, with some even continuing to provide financial support to Jean after his imprisonment. This clearly demonstrated the frightening power of psychological manipulation. Jean Sui's actions revealed the dangerous nature of sophisticated fraud and the cruelty of exploiting people's trust. Story 3. Around 9 a.m. on December 22, 2019 in Tifton, Lynn Tanner was returning home from Sunday service at First Baptist Church, where she had volunteered to help prepare for the Christmas Eve ceremony. Upon arriving home, she noticed her husband Willie Tanner's pickup truck parked in the driveway, which struck her as odd, since he had told her he needed to pick up some supplies for the store. As she entered the house, she could still smell the pleasant aroma of the Christmas tree that she and her husband had decorated together. However, an unsettling feeling crept over Lynn as she noticed the house's eerie silence, along with a strange, indescribable odor hanging in the air. Then, as she stepped into the living room, the sight before her made her knees buckle. Under the twinkling Christmas lights, Willie lay motionless on the floor, surrounded by shattered decorations. Blood from the wounds on his head had soaked into the carpet, and beside him lay a hammer covered in dark red stains. A liquid that Lynn, in her utter despair, recognized as her beloved husband's blood. The victim of this horrific murder was Willie Tanner, age 49, owner of Channel Hardware, a local hardware store that had been operating for over 20 years. Willie was known for his warm smile behind the counter, always welcoming customers and ready to chat about anything under the sun. In everyone's eyes, Willie seemed to have an ideal life. He was married to Lynn Tanner, his high school sweetheart. The couple regularly participated in local church activities and charity events. However, few knew that behind this perfect facade, Willie was harboring a secret. Despite being known as a devoted husband and model citizen, he was having an affair with Madison Kelly, an 18-year-old high school student. Madison was a regular customer at Willie's store, carrying with her the radiant smile of youth and a beauty that captivated many. Over time, their relationship evolved into a clandestine affair. The illicit relationship with a girl nearly 3 decades his junior kept Willie in constant turmoil, torn between guilt and desire. His conscience particularly troubled him as Christmas approached. Though Willie knew he was treading a dangerous path, he seemed to have lost all self-control to his passionate emotions. As Christmas drew nearer, Willie's changes became more apparent. The once warm home was frequently empty of his presence, family dinners increasingly replaced by excuses about late work. Though Lynn noticed these changes in her husband, she tried to convince herself it was just the usual stress of the holiday business season. Not only Lynn, but neighbors and close friends also couldn't help but notice how Willie's usual smile had been replaced by worried glances and a troubled demeanor. Fate has cruel ways of changing lives in an instant. On that seemingly peaceful Sunday morning, just days before Christmas, Lynn faced the most horrific nightmare of her life. Before her lay the lifeless body of her world crumbled. Her mind reeling, her body trembling uncontrollably. The terror and anguish gripped her heart like an invisible hand. In her panic, struggled to maintain composure as she reached for the phone. Her voice broke through tears as she sobbed. "Oh God, my husband, he's not breathing. There's blood everywhere." The 911 dispatcher gently instructed Lynn to keep away from the scene and wait for police and paramedics to arrive. Within moments, the tranquility of the quiet street was shattered by sirens and the flashing red and blue lights of ambulances and police cars. Curious eyes peered from neighboring windows, whispering and speculating about the sudden tragedy. On the front steps, Lynn sat with a vacant stare into space, her soul seemingly unable to catch up with the devastating events that had just unfolded. Through the curious crowd, Detective Nora Collins approached, a woman who exudes experience with 15 years in law enforcement. As she stepped down from her patrol car, Collins immediately noticed the bitter irony. The roof still adorned with twinkling Christmas lights and a bright wreath. While inside the warm home, a bloody tragedy awaited her investigation. The living room, once filled with laughter, now lay cold and lifeless. The Christmas tree stood as a silent witness to the bloody tragedy, its lights casting an eerie glow. The twinkling decorative lights reflected off scattered ornament fragments across the floor. Under the Christmas tree, where presents should have been, lay Willie in a pool of dark blood. His head had been brutally battered by merciless hammer blows, creating an unspeakably horrific scene. Blood had splattered everywhere, soaking into nearby decorations, staining the bright wrapping paper and shimmering ribbons. With the composure of someone who had faced numerous bloody crime scenes, Detective Collins quickly began her work. Her keen eyes missed nothing, examining every inch of the scene as if assembling pieces of a shattered puzzle of crime. The murder weapon, a blood-covered hammer, was carefully collected, each blood stain and potential fingerprint potentially holding the key to identifying the killer. Notably, while blood was splattered throughout the area, The crime scene was confined to a small space around the Christmas tree. Furthermore, besides the area where Willie lay, there were no signs of a struggle or fight. This suggested that the victim had been caught completely off guard, a sudden swift attack with no chance to defend himself. The following day, the forensics team arrived at the scene led by Dr. Philip Wong, a medical examiner renowned for his meticulous attention to detail and precision. In his white protective suit, he carefully examined Willie's body. Each wound on the victim's head was documented, measured, and photographed. The severe trauma to the skull region, which had endured multiple fatal hammer blows, was determined to be the direct cause of death. Based on the body's rigor mortis, he estimated the time of death between midnight and 1 p.m. the previous day. Detective Collins ordered her colleagues to collect all possible evidence from the crime scene, including fingerprints, photographs, and any clues that might point to the killer. They also interviewed Lynn Tanner. Despite still being in shock, Lynn managed to provide information about her mourning and Willie's activities from the day before. As the investigation deepened, Detective Collins increasingly felt this was a crime committed in a fit of rage. The brutality of the attack suggested the killer was either furious or jealous, emotions that often lead to uncontrolled violent behavior. The question remained, who had enough hatred for Willie Tanner to commit such a brutal act? The first suspect on Detective Collins' list was Madison Kelly, the 18-year-old high school student who was Willie's secret lover. Madison was an active and talented girl who participated enthusiastically in extracurricular activities, including the school drama club. She had impressed audiences with her leading role in a local theater production. However, few knew that beneath her perfect and confident exterior, Madison was emotionally fragile, a condition that had become increasingly apparent in recent months. Madison lived with her mother, Tammy Kelly, in a small but well-kept house in the suburbs. The Kelly family was known for being private, with Tammy maintaining strict control over Madison and holding rigid views about her daughter's appearance, especially after Madison's father came out as gay and left the family. On the afternoon of December 22nd, the same day Willie's body was discovered, detectives visited the Kelly residence to speak with Madison. She was still in her pajamas, sitting in her bedroom, and appeared shocked when informed about Willie's death. The room looked like any typical teenage girl's bedroom, with posters of pop stars like Taylor Swift and Ariana Grande on the walls. However, there were items suggesting a connection between Madison and Willie. On her bedside table, Detective Collins noticed a framed photograph of a shirtless Willie. When examining the girl's diaries, investigators found numerous entries detailing intimate encounters between the two, including sensitive details about their relationship. During the initial interrogation, Madison was cooperative with the police, but her demeanor changed dramatically when questioned about her relationship with Willie. She became unusually emotional. Madison admitted to the affair and described how their relationship had gradually developed over the past year. She revealed that she had deeply loved Willie and had imagined a future with him. However, things changed as Christmas approached, and he became increasingly distant. Madison admitted she had been afraid, thinking he was planning to end their relationship. When Detective Collins asked about Madison's whereabouts on the night of the murder, she hesitantly replied that she had been home alone studying. This alibi was unconvincing to investigators, and her behavior made them even more suspicious. Her streaming tears and trembling hands indicated she was under immense pressure, though it wasn't clear whether from guilt or grief. The interrogation continued in a tense atmosphere. Madison's demeanor shifted noticeably, transforming from grief-stricken to hardened. She insisted she had nothing to do with Willie's death. Then, unexpectedly, she began making incoherent statements and attempted to blame a mysterious man she called Bob. According to Madison, Bob had been manipulating her behavior throughout this time, forcing her to maintain the intimate relationship with Willie under threats of harm. However, when Detective Collins pressed for more details about this mysterious Bob, Madison became evasive and appeared confused. Madison's testimony contained numerous contradictions. Detective Collins didn't believe the girl's story at all. The irregularities in Madison's emotional responses, her obsession with Willie, and her unconvincing alibi made her the primary suspect in the case. However, Detective Collins knew she needed more concrete evidence before making an arrest. After meeting with Madison Kelly, Detective Collins turned her attention to another key figure in the case, Lynn Tanner, Willie's wife of 25 years. In the eyes of their neighbors, Lynn was an industrious and enthusiastic woman. From the outside, Everyone thought she had a blissful marriage. However, Detective Collins knew a different truth. Lynn had long harbored suspicions about her husband's infidelity. In the days before the murder, Lynn had been busy preparing for Christmas. She was actively involved in church activities, including helping with preparations for the Christmas Eve service at First Baptist Church. To others, Lynn appeared to believe in her family's happiness, but internally, she was increasingly anxious. She had noticed her husband's frequent absences from home, and whenever she asked, Willie would claim he was working late or attending church activities. However, a wife's intuition told her that her husband was hiding something. During the December 22nd interview, Lynn was still in shock from discovering her husband's body that morning. Sitting at her kitchen table, she recounted their marriage to the investigators. She described Willie as a loving husband, but candidly admitted their relationship had lost its spark in recent years, especially after their son left for college. She then revealed her suspicions about his infidelity, noting that he frequently rejected physical intimacy, though she could never find concrete evidence. At this point, Lynn's tears began flowing again. Perhaps it was the pain of losing Willie, mixed with the disappointment of their fractured relationship, that proved too overwhelming. When asked about her whereabouts on the night of the murder, Lynn stated she had been home preparing for the next day's church service. She said she went to bed early, expecting Willie to join her later. Around midnight, she woke up to find his side of the bed empty and assumed he had fallen asleep on the living room couch. It wasn't until the following morning's horrific discovery that she learned the truth. Lynn's account of that night seemed clear and logical. However, detectives couldn't rule out the possibility that she had killed her husband over suspicions of his affair. The brutality of the murder suggested this wasn't just about taking a life. It stemmed from deep emotional issues. Moreover, as Willie's wife, Lynn had both opportunity and motive to commit this act. Yet one thing Detective Collins was certain about: Lynn appeared genuinely devastated by her husband's death and had been fully cooperative throughout the investigation. She answered all questions without hesitation and even agreed to let police examine Willie's personal belongings, including his phone and computer. After interviewing Lynn Tanner, Detective Collins moved on to investigate another significant figure in the case: Tammy Kelly, Madison's mother. Tammy was known as a strong-willed and authoritarian woman. She had a reputation for perfectionism and was obsessed with appearances. Her house was always immaculately maintained, especially after her gay husband's departure. She was also actively involved in community activities and frequently organized events at the local church. However, Tammy's greatest concern was always her only daughter, Madison. The relationship between Tammy and Madison was constantly strained. Madison was a beautiful and alluring young woman, but these very qualities made Tammy anxious and insecure. She exerted excessive control over her daughter, micromanaging every aspect of Madison's life from clothing choices to education and friendships. Neighbors knew that Tammy placed extremely high expectations on her daughter and would become angry when Madison failed to meet her demands. There were even rumors that Tammy would resort to physical punishment whenever she felt her daughter was attracting too much attention from men in the community. On December 23rd, the day after the murder, Detective Collins visited Tammy at her home. She appeared unaffected by the previous day's events, calmly inviting Detective Collins into her living room, which was pristinely kept and decorated with traditional Christmas ornaments. Tammy spoke with a composed and confident demeanor, through her eyes betrayed an underlying tension. Collins began the interview by asking about Tammy's relationship with Willie. Without hesitation, Tammy praised him, describing him as a good man. However, when the conversation shifted to Madison, her attitude became noticeably more guarded. She admitted feeling dissatisfied with her daughter's recent behavior, noting that it had started wearing makeup and more revealing clothing in the weeks before the murder. To verify her suspicions, Detective Collins directly asked Tammy if she knew about the intimate relationship between her daughter and Willie. As expected, Tammy tried to evade the question. While denying any knowledge of the affair, she acknowledged noticing that Madison's dress had become increasingly provocative, even describing it as prostitute-like. Tammy claimed she had tried talking to her daughter, but Madison wouldn't listen and insisted everything was fine. After interviewing Tammy Kelly, Detective Collins felt troubled. Could blind jealousy and an obsessive need to control her daughter have driven Tammy to kill Willie? Surely, discovering her daughter's relationship with a much older man would have been deeply humiliating and her worst nightmare. Tammy certainly had a motive. She might have wanted to end the relationship at any cost. However, throughout the interview, Tammy maintained an unnaturally cold and calm demeanor. She showed no signs of guilt or remorse. While she was polite and cooperative with the police, she provided no useful information. After the interview, detectives knew they couldn't eliminate Tammy from their list of suspects. The investigation grew increasingly complex as each suspect had their own secrets and potential motives, but there was still no concrete evidence pointing to the killer. The detectives were still piecing together the clues when a breakthrough finally came on December 24, 2019, just one day before Christmas. That morning in Tifton, Georgia, under gloomy skies with temperatures around 39 degrees Fahrenheit, Detective Collins and her colleagues returned to the Tanner residence to re-examine every corner of the crime scene. They were determined to find any evidence they might have missed, no matter how small. Their persistence paid off when an officer discovered a torn piece of paper near the fireplace where carefully wrapped Christmas presents had been placed. The paper had been hidden under a rug with only a corner visible. It appeared to be a handwritten note, though only part of the content was legible. "You dirty boy, meet me at 1 p.m. Followed by the initials MK. This small piece of paper proved to be a major breakthrough in the investigation. The initials MK immediately caught Detective Collins. Could MK stand for Madison Kelly? If so, the time mentioned in the note coincided with Willie's estimated time of death, and Detective Collins realized this could be crucial evidence linking Madison to the crime and placing her at the scene when the murder occurred. Not wasting any time, Detective Collins immediately requested a handwriting analysis of the note. She needed to confirm whether it belonged to Madison. The paper was sent to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation in Atlanta for expert analysis. While waiting for the results, Detective Collins returned to Madison's home to conduct another search, looking for anything that might connect to the note or the murder. The results were startling. In Madison's bedroom, hidden under her mattress, Detective Collins and her colleagues discovered a diary. The journal contained numerous entries revealing Madison's obsession with Willie, including detailed descriptions of their intimate encounters and plans for secret meetings. Most significantly, one entry dated December 22nd matched the time and location mentioned in the note found at Willie's house. The torn note and the diary became crucial pieces of evidence proving Madison had been at the crime scene the night of the murder. Moreover, they revealed her clear motive, jealousy, and obsession. After these undeniable pieces of evidence were discovered, Madison Kelly was formally arrested on December 26, 2019. What surprised everyone was her eerily calm demeanor as she was handcuffed and led away. The news of the arrest shocked the community. People couldn't believe that such a beautiful young girl could commit such a brutal act. While Willie's family was still overwhelmed with grief and disappointment over his sudden death, they felt some relief knowing the killer had finally been caught. In early 2020, Madison Kelly's trial began. The case drew significant public attention, with the courtroom packed on the day of the proceedings. The prosecution argued that Madison's actions were premeditated. They contended that her feelings for Willie Tanner had evolved into a dangerous obsession, and she killed him when he tried to end their illicit relationship. The evidence that Madison brought the hammer to their meeting proved she had planned the violent act in advance. The defense attorney presented a completely different perspective. She argued that Madison was mentally unstable at the time of the murder. She explained that Madison had suffered a psychological breakdown after Willie attempted to end their relationship. Furthermore, the secret nature of their affair had only worsened her mental state. The attorney appealed to the jury to consider Madison's troubled family life and its profound impact on her psychological well-being. She portrayed Madison as a vulnerable young girl who had been exploited by a much older man. Eventually, she argued, the immense pressure had caused Madison to snap. Throughout the trial, Willie's family sat silently in the front row, their faces etched with grief. They listened in silence as details of Willie's double life were exposed. Beyond the pain of losing Willie, they felt the additional anguish and disappointment of learning how he had betrayed their trust, especially his wife of 25 years. The trial of Madison Kelly lasted several days, with conflicting arguments presented. Finally, after careful deliberation, on February 18, 2020, the jury reached their verdict. Madison Kelly was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The verdict sparked considerable controversy. Many felt the sentence was too lenient, given the brutality of her crime. Others argued it was a fair judgment, considering her young age and mental state. Regardless of the outcome, Willie's family felt relieved that the case had finally concluded. They understood that the psychological wounds would remain with them forever, and they would need to learn to live with this pain. As the trial ended, life in Tifton gradually returned to normal, though memories of the tragic case lingered. Willie's hardware store closed permanently. As for Lynn, despite community support and encouragement, she couldn't overcome the trauma. She ultimately decided to sell their family home and move to another town to start a new life. The truth of the case had been fully revealed. An 18-year-old girl had destroyed her future by falling into an ill-fated relationship with a man nearly 3 decades her senior. The story left behind important lessons about morality and proper conduct in relationships, while also demonstrating the serious consequences that can occur when people let their emotions override their judgment, leading to irreversible tragic actions. Story 4. The case takes place in Jiusan Township, Nantou County, Taiwan. On the morning of May 12, 2003, a young couple hiking in the mountains to gather herbs made a shocking discovery: an unidentified corpse. This remote area was sparsely populated, so they rushed down the mountain to the only nearby restaurant. With trembling voices, they recounted their grim find to the restaurant owner, who promptly called the police. After an agonizing 15-minute wait, the police finally arrived at the scene. Guided by the couple, they made their way through the overgrown mountain path. Eventually, they discovered the body of a woman lying on a steep rock face. The victim appeared to be between 40 and 50 years old, wearing a dress but naked from the waist down, with no underwear. Initial observations suggested this was neither suicide nor accident. A quick examination confirmed this suspicion. The time of death was estimated to be just 2 days prior. The victim's left arm showed signs of being bound, indicating she may have been assaulted before her death. There was evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her head. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Nantou County was known for its simple, peaceful way of life, and had never before witnessed such a brutal crime. The pressing questions were, who killed this woman and why? To solve the case, investigators first needed to identify the victim. However, there were no identifying items found on the body. Her phone and purse were missing. The only clue was a series of 7 Arabic numerals written on her left palm. The police released a description of the victim, hoping to find relatives or friends of the deceased. Soon after, a man surnamed Du came forward to identify the victim. He confirmed she was his mother, Chun Yiling, age 48. She was a single mother of 3 who ran a successful karaoke bar in town. Notably, her designer handbag, watch, and necklace were all missing. This led police to initially suspect a robbery homicide. When checking the victim's bank withdrawal records, security footage showed a heavily disguised man attempting to withdraw money, but failing due to incorrect PIN entries. Chun Yiling was known to have good business relationships and got along well with her neighbors, never making enemies. So who was this mysterious man? At this point, an investigator recalled the numbers on Chun Yiling's palm. He hypothesized, could these 7 digits be a phone number? Investigation revealed the number belonged to an apartment building in Mingxiang Township, Jiai County. The owner was a man named Lin. However, a bigger issue arose. Mr. Lin was a landlord, and this building was his rental property. Hundreds of people lived there, all Lin's tenants. Any of them could have been the owner of that phone number. With such an extensive tenant list, the police were unsure where to begin. Fortunately, investigating the victim's social connections yielded results. On the day Chun Yiling disappeared, she had driven to Nangong Temple in Liujia Township, Tainan. She parked her car and left it with an attendant, then departed with an unidentified person. Although they didn't know the license plate, police could trace the car's route based on available information. By reviewing surveillance footage along the way, they hoped to locate the vehicle. After tireless investigation, the police finally found the car. The owner was named Chen Ruekong, and this name also appeared on the tenant list provided by Mr. Lin. When the investigator saw this name, he immediately recognized it. More precisely, this was one of the most memorable suspects in his entire police career. This Chen Ruekong was somewhat famous in Jiai City, though in a rather peculiar way. Born in Jiai County, he was considered talented in his youth. After retiring from the Air Force, Ruekong joined the Mingxiang Oil Supply Center of the Chinese Petroleum Corporation as an oil truck driver. Later, through self-promotion, he became an engineer at the oil distribution center. On the surface, Ruekong appeared a bit slow-witted, but he was actually quite adept at managing social relationships. Neighbors and colleagues all had a good impression of him. In the 1980s, he could earn 80,000 new Taiwan dollars, about 2,800 US dollars per month, placing him firmly in the high-income bracket. However, fate seemed to play cruel jokes on Rui Kong. While his career flourished, his family experienced successive tragedies. 2 wives and a son all died in accidents. In the eyes of others, Rui Kong seemed to be a lonely star cursed by fate. In 1974, he married 22-year-old Zheng Bixia. After marriage, they had a son and 2 daughters. They were considered a model family. The couple never argued and often took their children on outings. However, in 1985, an accident occurred. Bixia was hit by a falling ceiling fan and hospitalized. Although it sounded terrible, she only suffered a broken leg and mild concussion. Unexpectedly, on the second day of her hospital stay, Zheng Bixia fell from her bed. This fall led to intracranial hemorrhage, and she died several days later despite emergency treatment. The hospital bed was only about 27 inches high, making such a fatal fall seem implausible. However, the Chen family could only accept this outcome. Due to Bixia's sudden death, Chen Ruikong received 2.35 million new Taiwan dollars, about 82,000 US dollars in insurance compensation. Just 6 months after Bixia's death, he remarried to Wang Shuang, a divorced elementary school teacher with a son. Although this marriage began midway through both their lives, they seemed to find happiness and contentment together. However, fate once again played a cruel trick on this family. In 1988, a heartbreaking incident occurred when Rukong discovered his stepson associating with delinquents. Upon returning home, Rukong argued with the boy. Angered, the stepson ran away from home, but tragically fell down a staircase, hit his head and died shortly after. After this incident, when facing Shuang, Rukong felt immense pain and regret. But what's done was done, and they could only console themselves by thinking it was the arrangement of fate. Time passed, and the Chen family seemed to return to normalcy. But by late 1995, tragedy struck again. Ruokong's biological son, Chen Jianhong, was accidentally injured while out alone. He returned home complaining only of a headache without explaining how he was hurt. On the way to the hospital, he fell into a coma and died shortly after due to delayed treatment. Losing 2 sons in succession plunged the family into darkness. Neighbors were filled with sympathy, unable to understand why misfortune kept befalling them. Many advised the couple to check their home's feng shui, thinking something might be affecting their fate. But it didn't end there. Just a year later, Wang Shuang, Rukang's second wife, also met with a tragic accident. Perhaps still grief-stricken from losing her son, she was distracted while driving and crashed into a roadside guardrail. When Rukang received the call from the police, he learned his wife had already passed away. One might think this was the peak of the family's tragedies, but subsequent events would raise even more questions about the suspicious coincidences surrounding this family. In 1997, Rui Kong married for the 3rd time. Once again, he married a single mother with a son. Her name was Yen Liqian, and she owned a clothing store. Her son was in high school. Rui Kong, still appearing somewhat slow-witted, was very good to his wife's son, even offering rides on rainy days. With Rui Kong's stable job and high income, Li Qin felt he was a man she could entrust her life to. Just when everyone thought this might be the start of a new life for them, tragedy struck again. Only a year later, Li Qin's son, Chen Zhongqing, died in a traffic accident. Since the boy was older, the couple didn't closely monitor him, especially Rui Kong as the stepfather. On the day of the incident, the couple had gone to bed early. At midnight, when Rui Kong woke up to use the bathroom, he found his stepson lying on the sofa with a head wound. He quickly woke his wife, telling her to start the car while he carried the boy downstairs. Sadly, despite a night of emergency treatment at the hospital, they couldn't save him. After a simple funeral, life seemed to return to normal. But unlike previous incidents, a secret investigation into Chen Yongqing's death was underway. The police in charge of the case were filled with suspicion. How could a severe traffic accident causing such a serious head injury not be reported to authorities immediately? Why did they wait until after the victim's death to report it? These details added to the mystery surrounding the series of tragedies in Ruikong's family. According to the location of the traffic accident provided by Ruikong, police found no surveillance cameras at the scene. Moreover, Chen couldn't specify exactly where the incident occurred. Notably, Zhongqing's bicycle showed no signs of collision. This raised a big question. How could someone so severely injured cycle home? Faced with a barrage of questions from the police, Rui Kong suddenly changed his statement. He said that when he discovered his son on the sofa, the boy was already unconscious, and everything he said before was just speculation. He assumed his son must have been in a car accident. However, these new explanations only made the situation more confusing and illogical. The situation became even more suspicious when police checked Jingqing's insurance records. They discovered that just 3 months before the accident, Rui Kong had purchased accident insurance for his son from 5 different insurance companies, totaling millions in coverage. This was puzzling as Zhongqing was just an ordinary student, not involved in any dangerous activities. With a monthly salary of $80,000 new Taiwan dollars, about $2,800 US dollars, Rui Kong was spending $20,000 to $30,000 NTD $700 to $1,050 US dollars on his son's insurance premiums, which seemed unreasonable. Notably, Li Qin, Rui Kong's wife, knew nothing about these insurance policies. Regarding this, Rui Kong defended himself by saying life is full of unexpected accidents. This explanation, coming from someone who had experienced so many family tragedies, sounded quite convincing. He argued that his previous losses had made him more sensitive about insurance. Additionally, he claimed that recommendations from friends in the insurance industry led him to purchase multiple policies for his stepson. To prove his innocence, Ruotsong agreed to take a lie detector test. However, the results were not as expected, as he failed to pass some crucial questions. Previously, each incident had occurred at different times and was handled by separate units, so no one noticed anything unusual. However, when the police conducted a comprehensive investigation, they discovered suspicious similarities between the accidents. Notably, most victims died from severe head trauma, with causes reported as traffic accidents or falls. Another important detail was that, except for the case of Wang Shuang, his second wife, Rui Kong was always the only person present at the scene when these incidents occurred. These factors made it difficult to explain the events simply as life's uncertainties. Faced with police suspicion, Rui Kong remained very calm. However, at this point, the media began extensively reporting on his alleged murders of his wives and children for insurance fraud. This completely disrupted the investigation's rhythm. Before the police could react, Rui Kong proactively contacted reporters, tearfully accusing the police of framing him, while pressuring insurance companies to quickly pay out claims without delay. Thus, he managed to sway public opinion. Subsequently, the police used methods like wiretapping and surveillance to investigate Rui Kong's friends and relatives, but still couldn't find any evidence. Theoretically, with such a high salary, Rui Kong shouldn't have been short of money. Moreover, even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. His own son had died in one of these accidents. Due to lack of conclusive evidence, the investigation had to be temporarily suspended. Rui Kong finally received insurance compensation. Though only $160,000 new Taiwan dollars, about $5,600 US, a modest sum compared to previous payouts, likely due to the suspicions surrounding this case. By this point, over 13 years, Rui Kong had received a total of $20 million new Taiwan dollars, about $700,000 US dollars in insurance payouts from the deaths of his family members. Although he had temporarily escaped legal consequences, his wife Li Qin began to lose trust in him. Perhaps unable to come to terms with her son's death, or possibly fearing for her own life, she no longer dared to live with Rui Kong. Consequently, she initiated a divorce. From then on, the tragedies in the Chen family seemed to cease. Rui Kong never married again, and naturally, no one dared to do so. It wasn't until 3 years later, when Chen Yiling's body was discovered on a cliff, that he reappeared in the public eye as a suspect. In fact, although Rui Kong didn't remarry, he wasn't idle. He began dating, finding girlfriends, and using various excuses to take money from them. On May 10, 2003, he happened to meet Chen Yiling. Upon discovering her good financial situation, he pursued her fervently. After years of dating various women, he was very experienced in this. Yiling was quickly charmed and agreed to go hiking with him in Jushin. This time, with the aid of technology, the police gathered ample evidence. Not only did they have the phone number in Chen Yiling's palm and road surveillance footage, but they also thoroughly investigated her call history. In the 3 days before her death, the same phone number appeared multiple times in her call history. Police quickly traced this number to a public phone booth. The surveillance camera next to the booth clearly captured Rui Kong's face. Additionally, police obtained surveillance video of him using Yiling's bank card to withdraw money. Staff at the checkpoint on the day of the incident also confirmed Rukong's identity. With this concrete evidence, the police could proceed with the arrest. However, the next problem they faced was that Rukong had disappeared. His phones all switched off. It wasn't until May 22, 2003, that the police finally intercepted a call from him. This call was to his girlfriend, Xiao Suhui. In the call, he said he was injured and hospitalized, asking her to come take care of him. It turned out he was maintaining relationships with both Suhui and Yiling. The police quickly went to the hospital to make the arrest. They found him lying in a hospital bed, his body covered in bruises, appearing severely injured. Suhui, sitting beside him, was startled and trembling when the police suddenly burst in. The police quickly noticed the Rolex watch on Suhui's wrist, which belonged to Yiling. They also found Yiling's phone, wallet, and 2 blank checks on Ruekong. During the subsequent interrogation, Ruekong remained very calm. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he had to admit to killing Yiling, but claimed it wasn't premeditated murder. He said they had an argument while driving, and an accident occurred during the dispute in the car. The police, confronted with such a psychologically strong and cunning man, couldn't help but sigh, understanding why he had easily evaded justice before. On the other hand, the police investigation made a new breakthrough. The deaths of Ruekong's 2 wives and 3 sons had netted him nearly 20 million new Taiwan dollars, about $700,000 in insurance payouts. Despite his high salary, strangely, his lifestyle wasn't wealthy. He had no properties, cars, or investments in his name. So where had all this money gone? Following this line of inquiry, the police finally uncovered Chun Ruekong's true face. The seemingly honest, slow-witted man turned out to be a gambling addict. Needing large sums for gambling, he had started borrowing from loan sharks. Unable to repay these high-interest loans, the injuries on his body were actually inflicted by debt collectors from these illegal lenders. This time, Chun Ruekong finally stopped evading and confessed to the entire process of killing Yiling. She had happily gone on a trip with him, unaware she wouldn't return. On the way, Ruekong casually offered her some liver protection pills he claimed to take regularly. Unsuspecting, Yiling took 2 pills and quickly fell asleep. In reality, these weren't liver protection pills at all, but sleeping pills. When Ruekong stopped the car at a cliff, he first sexually assaulted Yiling, then robbed her of all personal belongings, and finally pushed her off the cliff. He had planned for Yiling to fall into a deep ravine, leaving no trace. But unexpectedly, her fall was interrupted by a rock ledge, leading to her discovery. Although he admitted to the murder, the police weren't satisfied. They knew Yiling wasn't his first victim. But no matter how they questioned him, Ruekong wouldn't admit to killing for insurance money. At this point, the police realized that continuing to interrogate him this way wasn't effective. They needed to find a key point to break through Ruekong's psychological defenses. Subsequently, they conducted a more detailed investigation into every aspect of his life. Through their inquiries, the police discovered that Ruekong greatly valued ancestral worship. Additionally, the Yiling case alone was enough to sentence him to death. Therefore, they told him they could help arrange his ancestral worship and would protect his 2 daughters from media harassment. This finally led Ruekong to reveal all the horrific secrets about killing his family. According to his confession, except for his second wife, who truly died in an accident, the others were all killed by him. Although he seemed very honest, the police still doubted his statement. They found the death of his second wife, Wang Shuang, still very suspicious. Wang Shuang had crashed into a roadside guardrail on August 19, 1996, resulting in a fatal head injury. Strangely, the car had almost no visible collision damage. She had an unexplained 2.4-inch wound on the right side of her head. Moreover, there were no brake marks on the road. The case took a dramatic turn in June 2003 when the police found a key witness, a colleague surnamed Gua, who had given Ruoqing a ride near the scene of Wang Shuang's accident. Faced with this new evidence, Ruoqing finally confessed. The horrifying truth was revealed. Wang Shuang's death wasn't a traffic accident, but a premeditated murder. Ruoqing had argued with her in the car, then hit her head with a wooden stick before deliberately crashing the car into the guardrail to stage an accident. Furthermore, Ruoqing confessed to the death of his first wife, Zheng Bixia. Although she had initially been injured by a falling fan, her actual death resulted from Ruekong violently slamming her head against a wall during an argument before her hospital discharge. Panicked by his actions, he staged the scene to look like an accidental fall from the hospital bed. Initially, this unintentional killing tormented Ruokong. However, when he received a large insurance payout, his mentality changed completely. From that point, Ruokong gradually descended into a life of crime, becoming a remorseless killer, who carefully planned subsequent murders to profit from insurance payouts. Whenever he accrued large debts, Ruokong would think of the easy money from insurance claims. Finally, he couldn't resist trying a second time. At this point, he wasn't yet deranged enough to harm his biological son, so he chose to deliberately provoke his stepson. During an argument, he forcefully slammed the boy's head against a wall, then staged it as an accident. After receiving another large insurance payout, Chen Ruokong completely fell into a cycle of evil, even turning against his own son. When his biological son Chen Jianhong joined a gang and repeatedly ignored warnings, Ruokong fatally struck his head with a rock. He later beat Wang Shuiying to death with a stick and staged a car accident. His second stepson, Chen Zhongqing, was also killed by him, which was again staged as an external car accident injury. When Yan Likuan got out of the car to retrieve something, he smashed Yongqing's head against the sharp corner of a stair railing. By this time, both the police and insurance companies were becoming suspicious, making Ruokong realize he couldn't use this method anymore. He then lay low for a period. Afterward, he began dating middle-aged women, scamming them for money and favors, until the Yiling incident exposed him. The ill-gotten gains from these women, and his monthly salary, were all lost to gambling. Most chillingly, the police found a notebook among his possessions listing the birth dates and death dates of all his family members. During interrogation, it was revealed that he used these as numbers for buying lottery tickets. As the impact of these cases grew, many people began voluntarily providing new leads to the police. The authorities were shocked to realize that the number of people who died at Chen Ruokong's hands might far exceed 6. Wang Shuiying's close friend, Wang Xini, had disappeared in June 1995 after receiving a phone call. She had previously lent money to Ruokong. After the case was exposed, her family began to suspect her disappearance was unusual. Another of Ruokong's former colleagues, Wang Xumi, who had been close to him, also suddenly disappeared in 1998, not even returning home when her husband and eldest son died. A woman from Jiayi City was also suspected to have vanished due to her close relationship with Ruokong. However, when faced with the disappearances of these women, Ruokong consistently denied any involvement. Before the trial, Ruokong repeatedly changed his testimony and even offered $4 million new Taiwan dollars, about $140,000, to bribe the police. However, all these efforts were in vain. In 2004, he was sentenced to 5 death penalties and 1 life imprisonment. But in the final trial, the judge considered that Ruokong's confession to killing 5 family members qualified for sentence reduction, so the 5 death sentences were commuted to 20 years in prison. However, the death sentence for killing Chen Yiling remained unchanged. On April 19, 2013, Chen Ruokong met his 2 daughters. Crying, he said, "Dad was wrong, I'm sorry." But his daughters kept their heads down, never looking at him. Amidst his sobs, they turned and left without saying a word. Before his execution, after eating his last meal, Chen Ruokong's body went limp as he was dragged to the execution ground. With a single gunshot, the life of this criminal with a human face but a beast's heart came to an end. After his death, no one wanted to claim his body. Even organ donation was rejected by all hospitals, fearing contamination by his evil deeds. Story 5: The case takes us to Gangnam District in Seoul, South Korea. Located south of the Han River, this area is filled with skyscrapers, luxury cars, and high-end fashion boutiques. It is a hub for the country's elite and affluent residents. The main character of our story is a 9-year-old boy named Lee Hyung-ho, a 3rd grader at Cheongdam Elementary School in Seoul. He has an older brother and a younger brother, making him the middle child. After his parents' divorce, his younger brother lived with their biological mother, while Lee Hyung-ho lived with his father, stepmother, and older brother. His father is named Lee Woo-suk, and his stepmother is Choi Yoon-ji. The family of 4 resided in a modern apartment in Cheongdam-dong, Gangnam District, Seoul, an area known as a symbol of wealth. Despite being a stepmother, Choi Yoon-ji was very loving toward both of her husband's children. They were supposed to have a happy and carefree life. However, one winter evening, an incident occurred that completely shattered their lives and became one of the 3 most mysterious cases in South Korea. Let's go back to January 29th, 1991 to uncover the details of this event. It was a Tuesday, and it was already dark outside the window. On this cold and quiet winter night, 9-year-old Lee Hyung-ho had not yet returned home, causing his parents great concern. Like many other boys, Lee Hyung-ho was a mischievous child. His world was always full of wonders. Although he loved playing, he wasn't thoughtless. Whenever he went out to play, he would make sure to return home before dark. But today was an exception. His mother, Choi Yoon-ji, called his classmate's house to inquire about his whereabouts. According to his friend Kim, that afternoon Lee Hyung-ho came over for a vegetable rice bowl. Afterward, the two boys went to the playground near the Hyundai apartment complex. Around 5:30 p.m., Kim decided to head home. But Lee Hyung-ho wanted to play a bit longer, so he told Kim to go ahead. When asked why he wanted to stay, Lee Hyung-ho replied that he was afraid of being scolded by his mother. Kim then went home, leaving Lee Hyung-ho alone at the playground. Hearing this, a deep sense of unease filled Choi Yoon-ji. By 8 p.m., Mr. and Mrs. Choi decided they could not wait any longer and split up to search for their son. They headed to the playground near the apartment complex, calling out his name as they went. After a while, their throats became parched from shouting so much. Despite their best efforts, they still could not find Lee Hyung-ho. Mr. and Mrs. Choi decided to contact the police. Once notified, the Gangnam District Police in Seoul immediately dispatched officers to the house to investigate. The media, upon learning about the situation, also arrived to conduct interviews. The house became crowded with police officers, reporters, and neighbors. The atmosphere was extremely tense. Mrs. Choi Yoon-ji could be heard sobbing occasionally, while Mr. Lee Woo-suk sat beside his wife, his hands clenched tightly, his face showing clear signs of worry and helplessness. At 11:30 p.m., the phone suddenly rang. Mr. Lee Woo-suk quickly answered. On the other end of the line, a cold, chilling voice spoke. "The boy is in my hands. Within 2 days, prepare 70 million won and install a phone in your car." The kidnapper emphasized that Mr. Lee must not inform the police, then abruptly hung up. At that moment, the entire house fell silent. Even the reporters seemed to sense the eeriness of the situation as a dark, ominous atmosphere took over. One by one, the journalists quietly left the house, leaving Mr. and Mrs. Lee weighed down with anxiety. Initially, the police analyzed the case and concluded that the kidnappers seemed to have intimate knowledge of the family's circumstances. They knew this family was wealthy and capable of paying 70 million won in cash. At the time, 70 million won was equivalent to about 270 million won in 2024, or approximately $200,000, a sum not easily accessible to most families. The demand to install a phone in the car was a peculiar detail that puzzled the police, leaving them uncertain about the kidnappers' next move. After discussing with Mr. Lee, the police decided to temporarily comply with the kidnappers' demands to ensure the hostages' safety. 2 days later, on January 31st, the phone at the house rang again. Mrs. Choi Yoon-ji hurriedly answered. On the other end, a male voice claimed to be an officer from the Seoul district, offering support to the Gangnam police in the investigation, and asked Mrs. Choi to hand the phone to the officer nearby. As Mrs. Choi was about to give the phone to the officer next to her, she suddenly sensed something was off. The officer quickly signaled with his eyes and gestures that the person on the phone was the kidnapper. Mrs. Choi's heart raced, and she broke out in a cold sweat. However, she quickly regained her composure and pretended to be confused, saying, "What are you talking about? There's no police officer in my house." Before she could finish her sentence, the kidnapper hung up, likely having gotten the answer he wanted. Meanwhile, Mr. Lee was in his car when he received a call from the kidnapper. The kidnapper instructed Mr. Lee to bring the ransom money and drive to Area 2 of the parking lot at Gimpo International Airport. Upon arrival, Mr. Lee was to leave the money and car keys inside the vehicle, then board bus number 600 to leave the airport. The police had already set up a secret operation, with officers hidden nearby waiting for the kidnapper to show up. However, they waited in vain for 3 hours in the freezing cold, but the kidnapper never appeared. Just as confusion set in, the phone at Mrs. Choi Yoon-ji's house rang again. An angry voice came from the other end. There was someone else in the car besides Lee Woo-suk, and there was a Gangnam District Police officer hiding in the trunk. It turned out that the police had secretly placed an officer inside Mr. Lee's trunk, planning to ambush the kidnapper as soon as he got into the car. So, how did the kidnapper know there was a police officer in the car? After analyzing the situation, the police concluded that the kidnapper had no clear view of the inside of the car. The trunk couldn't be seen from the outside, and in a previous call, the kidnapper had only mentioned the back seat, not the trunk. Therefore, it seemed likely that he was engaging in psychological warfare, trying to probe and disrupt the police's plans. Shortly afterward, the kidnapper used a payphone near a bus station to call Mr. Lee Woo-suk again, directing him to drive alone to Daein Cinema Theater. Mr. Lee followed the instructions and drove to the location. There, he received further instructions to turn on all the car's lights, open all the doors and the trunk, and then leave the area. Even though Mr. Lee complied with the instructions, the kidnapper still did not show up. It appeared to be another carefully orchestrated game of cat and mouse. Next, the kidnapper instructed Mr. Lee to drive to Tig Yuk Dang Cafe. Upon arrival, Mr. Lee received new directions to open all the car doors and then enter the cafe to get coffee. However, by this time, Tig Yuk Dang Cafe was closed. The kidnapper then told Mr. Lee to go to a nearby fried chicken restaurant and wait. As he sat in the aroma-filled restaurant, Mr. Lee's anxiety only grew. Back home, Mrs. Choi Yoon-ji was also anxiously waiting for a call from the kidnapper. Suddenly, the phone rang, and the kidnapper's angry voice shouted in reality. The kidnapper's demands for Mr. Lee to drive to multiple locations were a tactic to check if the police were following. The police, of course, had countermeasures of their own, switching vehicles and officers with each location change to avoid detection. As a result, the police were not fully convinced by the kidnapper's claims. However, when Mrs. Choi Yoon-ji answered the phone, she was terrified. She immediately broke into sobs, apologizing profusely before regaining her composure. My husband was too scared to go alone, so he asked a relative to accompany him. Upon hearing this, the kidnapper seemed to calm down. At this point, the police believed the kidnapper would not show up. However, they unexpectedly spotted two suspicious-looking men lurking near the car with the ransom money. It seemed like they intended to take the bag left on the back seat. Yet, the two men hesitated for a long time before abruptly leaving without taking any action. Throughout this ordeal, the police refrained from making any moves against the suspicious individuals because they believed these were not the kidnappers. Acting rashly could ruin the entire operation. Despite feeling full of anxiety and helplessness, Mr. and Mrs. Lee had no choice but to follow the police's instructions and quietly wait for the next opportunity. That day, the kidnapper made a total of 16 threatening phone calls. Each time the phone rang, it broke their hearts. By early morning, the kidnapper called again, demanding the couple bring 70 million won in cash to a new stand across from the Sejong Center for the Performing Arts on Sejong-daro in Jongnyoga District. At 2:20 a.m., Mr. and Mrs. Lee arrived at the designated location with a suitcase filled with counterfeit money. Mrs. Choi Yoon-ji noticed a young man around 20 years old, acting suspiciously near the new stand, pacing back and forth while glancing occasionally at the spot where the money was placed. As the police were debating whether to arrest him, the young man seemed to realize something was off and suddenly fled. The police once again missed an opportunity to capture the suspect. A week after Lee Hyung-ho's disappearance on February 5th, the kidnapper contacted Mr. Lee again, instructing him to go to a bus stop to retrieve a pre-placed note. While confirming the task, the kidnapper nonchalantly asked Mr. and Mrs. Lee if they had eaten, which struck them as odd. At the bus stop, Mr. Lee found the note inside a trash can. It listed 2 bank accounts with the names of the account holders, one belonging to Kim Jo-sun at a commercial bank and the other to Jun Jong-soo at the Bank of Korea. The kidnapper demanded that Mr. Lee transfer 20 million won to each account. After receiving the instructions, Mr. Lee discussed the situation with the police. They ultimately decided to transfer money only to the commercial bank account and immediately notified the bank to freeze it. However, at that time, South Korea's banking system was still lax, making it easy to falsify information and open accounts. This created significant challenges for the police investigation. As a result, they were unable to trace any leads from the account holders. The note was then sent for forensic examination, but no suspicious fingerprints were found on it. Sometime later, the kidnapper called again, asking Mr. Lee if the money had been transferred. Mr. Lee did not lie. He honestly admitted that he had only transferred money to one account. The kidnapper didn't seem surprised by this answer and did not press further before abruptly hanging up. From that point on, Mr. and Mrs. Lee lived in constant fear and anxiety. A week later, around 8 p.m. on February 13th, the kidnapper suddenly called again. He coldly announced a new location. Before Mr. and Mrs. Lee could react, he provided further instructions to go under the Olympic Bridge. You will find a metal box with a piece of paper weighed down by a stone. After saying this, the kidnapper's tone softened as he coaxed. Be good, and there will be a gift for the child, a car for the child. This statement seemed to offer a glimmer of hope for Mr. and Mrs. feeling that the kidnapper's attitude had softened. Mrs. Choi Eun-ji pleaded with him to let her hear Lee Hyung-ho's voice. She desperately wanted to confirm her son's safety, but the kidnapper refused bluntly. Despite being filled with hope, Mr. Lee followed the instructions and went under an overpass on Olympic Boulevard, where he found a note. The note read, "Leave 50 million won in cash on Yanga Bridge. After leaving, you will learn the boy's whereabouts." The group hurried to Yanga Bridge, found the specified location, placed the suitcase with the cash there, and quickly left. In reality, the suitcase contained only a thin layer of about 100,000 won on top, with the rest filled with newspaper. The police discreetly monitored the area, prepared to arrest the kidnapper as soon as he appeared. This could be the police's last chance. In this tense moment, everyone held their breath and waited. But then an unexpected mishap occurred. The police mistakenly communicated the wrong location over the radio, causing the entire police force to arrive at the wrong place. At 10 p.m. that night, a black car sped by the ransom drop-off point like a phantom. In a split second, the car door swung open and a gloved hand reached out, snatching the suitcase with lightning speed. The vehicle didn't even noticeably slow down during the process. The suddenness of the incident, coupled with the police's blunder, allowed the kidnapper to escape right in front of everyone's eyes. No one managed to catch a glimpse of the license plate. After grabbing the suitcase, the kidnapper called Mr. and Mrs. Lee again. His voice was dripping with mockery. "There's a lot of fake money in here. I guess you really don't want the boy back, do you? But I appreciate that you didn't call the police." His words felt like salt in the wounded hearts of Mr. and Mrs. Lee. Mrs. Choi Eun-ji frantically asked, "Are you with Lee Hyung-ho?" The kidnapper chuckled, sounding both relaxed and faintly tired. 6 days later, on February 19th, a man in his 30s showed up at the Sangjidong branch of the commercial bank, attempting to withdraw money from one of the accounts previously provided by the kidnapper. While the bank teller was processing the transaction, they unexpectedly discovered that the account had been frozen, but the system did not display a specific reason. Feeling confused, the teller asked the man if he knew why the account was frozen. Upon hearing this, the man's expression changed. He quickly snatched the bank card back from the teller's hand and fled the bank, disappearing into the crowd. This man was indeed the kidnapper whom the police had been desperately searching for. Unfortunately, the bank had not yet installed surveillance cameras at that time, making the bank teller the only person who had seen the kidnapper's face. According to the witness, the man was about 5 feet 5 inches tall with small, narrow eyes, thick eyelids, thin and tight lips, and a slightly long chin. Based on this description, the police created a composite sketch of the criminal. The sketch was printed on flyers, with 280,000 copies distributed nationwide. Additionally, the kidnapper's voice was recorded and 1,000 cassette tapes were circulated across the country. However, despite all efforts, the kidnapper vanished without a trace. The eerie laughter in his final call was all that remained for the police and Mr. Lee's family. Public outrage in South Korea grew over the police's negligence as they repeatedly lost track of the criminal. The police blamed the bank while the bank pointed fingers at its employees. In 1993, South Korea implemented a financial identification system, establishing a stronger foundation for financial security and crime prevention. In this shocking kidnapping case, the criminal made more than 60 threatening phone calls. To avoid being tracked by the police through phone signals, each call was strictly limited to no more than 2 minutes. Additionally, he left over 10 handwritten notes with uneven, sloppy writing, clearly attempting to conceal his handwriting style. Nevertheless, the police persisted in analyzing the notes, identifying certain writing habits and distinctive features of the criminal. A month and a half after the kidnapping, at 12:20 p.m. on March 13th, a maintenance worker painting a guardrail near a drainage ditch along Olympic Boulevard close to the Jamsil Olympic Apartments in Songpa District discovered something unusual. Initially, he thought it was a doll from a distance, but as he got closer, he was horrified to realize it was the body of a young boy. This tragic discovery confirmed what everyone had feared most. The child was Lee Hyung-ho, the boy who had been missing for so long. When found, Lee Hyung-ho's eyes, nose, and mouth were sealed with plastic tape, and his hands and feet were tightly bound with a scarf. His body was stiff, lying across the drainage ditch in an unusual position. He was still wearing the same clothes from the day he went missing, but his shoes had been replaced with a newer pair of sneakers. A pager borrowed from a classmate was found attached to his clothes, showing a total of 1,202 steps. The location where the body was discovered was about a 10-minute drive from his home. The autopsy results revealed 3 bruises on Lee Hyung-ho's forehead, believed to have been caused by the kidnapper in a moment of lost composure. His stomach contained remnants of rice, green onions, and other food he had eaten at a classmate's house on the day he was abducted. The undigested food indicated that he was killed not long after being kidnapped. The cause of death was determined to be suffocation, with the time of death estimated between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. on January 30th. There were signs on the body indicating that it had been frozen. This detail led to a troubling conclusion. The drainage ditch was not the initial crime scene. It is highly likely that the kidnapper never intended to keep Lee Hyung-ho alive. After killing the boy, he stored the body in a freezer before disposing of it later. Lee Hyung-ho's funeral was filled with an overwhelming sense of grief. His parents, relatives, classmates, teachers, and even strangers who were moved by his story came to bid farewell to the unfortunate boy. Everyone shared a common hope to bring the perpetrator to justice soon. The case of Lee Hyung-ho garnered significant media attention. News outlets continuously covered the incident, and the entire nation of South Korea watched and prayed for the boy's safety. Now all efforts were focused on finding the culprit. The police concluded that this was not a crime committed by a lone kidnapper. This assessment was based on multiple factors. During phone calls, the kidnapper repeatedly used the word "we," unintentionally or intentionally revealing the existence of a criminal group. Voice analysis from the calls suggested that there were 1 or 2 male participants. Further investigation showed that all ransom calls were made from different public phone booths across the city. These locations were scattered without any specific pattern, stretching from Dongdaemun to Jingu and Cheongdamdong. While Mr. Lee Woo-suk drove around following the kidnappers, the phone call locations also constantly changed. Meanwhile, Mrs. Choi Yunji frequently received calls from the criminal. It became evident that the criminals were deliberately exploiting the separation of Mr. and Mrs. Lee to mislead them, conceal their movements, and prevent police intervention. The dispersed operation method and constant change of locations indicate that this crime was meticulously planned and sophisticated. The careful calculations and coordinated efforts further reinforced the police's conclusion that this was an organized crime. The situation on Yanga Bridge was particularly telling. As the kidnapper's vehicle drove past the drop-off point, it quickly snatched the ransom without slowing down. Only the front passenger door opened, and an arm swiftly reached out in a rapid, precise motion. It would have been nearly impossible for a single person to carry out such a flawless operation. Based on other clues, the police speculated that the criminal gang involved in the kidnapping likely consisted of 3 to 4 individuals with distinct roles. One responsible for communicating with Mr. and Mrs. Lee by phone, one driving the getaway car to ensure a quick escape, one either exiting the vehicle to act or monitoring the Lees from a distance, and possibly a leader who had detailed knowledge of the Lee family and orchestrated the entire crime. As for the kidnapper who made the phone calls, police analysis revealed that the first call was made from a phone booth located about 1.2 miles from Lee Hyung-ho's apartment. The kidnapper repeatedly directed Mr. Lee's movements, indicating familiarity with the area, suggesting that he might have lived or worked nearby. However, due to investigative errors in the early stages, the police failed to screen individuals in the victim's neighborhood. Now, they could only rely on the voice clues to make deductions. The fact that the kidnapper only made calls on weekdays also caught the police's attention. It was plausible that he could be an ordinary worker. However, this theory raised doubts, as it would be difficult for a regular worker to dedicate so much time during working hours to commit these crimes. The kidnapper's voice was deep, and had a distinct Seoul and Gyeonggi-do accent, frequently using vulgar language, possibly due to a long-standing work environment. Police speculated that he had at least a high school education and was likely in his 30s. Additionally, during the conversations, the kidnapper occasionally appeared indecisive after making demands and receiving Mr. Lee's responses. In later stages, his voice revealed clear signs of fatigue and impatience, leading the police to believe that he might not have been the gang leader, but rather someone following orders. Right after releasing the composite sketch, the police received numerous tips from the public. Some citizens reported seeing Lee Hyung-ho with a young man in his 20s near the location where the body was found. A street vendor also claimed to have seen the two at Han River Park. The young man accompanying Lee Hyung-ho had similar appearance and voice characteristics to those described in the sketch. The police quickly identified the suspect, but ultimately determined that he was just an ordinary person with no connection to the case. The police continued their investigation by looking into Mr. Lee Woo-shik's work as an executive at a large company. He had conflicts with competitors, suggesting a potential motive of revenge. However, the police found no concrete evidence to support this theory. The police also considered a man named Kim, who worked at Gimpo International Airport. His job position and work environment matched many aspects of the kidnapper's profile. For instance, he had a flexible work schedule, allowing him to manage time even on weekdays. And his workplace, Gimpo International Airport, was one of the locations where the kidnapper had directed Mr. Lee Woo-shik to go. His handwriting showed similarities to that of the kidnapper. More importantly, the police discovered that the name of this man's sister differed by only one letter from the bank account holder's name provided by the kidnapper. However, all this was insufficient to convict him, as the police could not definitively link Mr. Kim to the crime. The investigation then shifted focus to Lee Sang-jae, the maternal uncle of Lee Hyung-ho, who became the primary suspect. At that time, Lee Sang-jae was 29 years old, a telecommunications graduate and financially struggling, frequently borrowing money from Lee Woo-shik, the father of Lee Hyung-ho. Their relationship was known to be strained. At the time, child abductions were becoming increasingly frequent in South Korea, prompting schools to intensify safety education for students. If approached by a stranger, Lee Hyung-ho would likely have cried for help. However, he willingly went along without resisting, suggesting that the perpetrator was likely someone familiar to him. As the victim's uncle, Lee Sang-jae naturally became a focus of the police investigation. Kim, the friend who was with Lee Hyung-ho on the day of the incident, said that while the two children were playing at the apartment playground, they noticed a young man smoking nearby, with his back turned to them. However, they couldn't see his face clearly enough for identification. The reason why Lee Hyung-ho did not want to return home that day was because he feared being scolded by his mother. It was speculated that this fear stemmed from his stepmother, Choi Eun-ji, disapproving of his interactions with his younger half-brother, Lee Sang-ho. In the divorce between Lee Hyung-ho's parents, Lee Sang-jae always sided with his sister. After the divorce, the court ordered Lee Hyung-ho's biological mother to pay Mr. Lee Woo-shik 70 million won in child support. This decision enraged both Lee Sang-jae and his sister. Coincidentally, 70 million won was also the exact amount demanded as ransom by the kidnapper. Moreover, during the investigation, the police discovered that the names of the two bank account holders provided by the kidnapper matched the names of two of Lee Sang-jae's friends. Voice analysis also showed a 92% match between Lee Sang-jae's voice and the kidnapper's voice in the recorded calls. With so many coincidences, the police immediately summoned Lee Sang-jae for questioning. However, he provided an alibi, claiming that he was traveling in Gyeongju City, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, on the day of Lee Hyung-ho's disappearance. To support his claim, he presented a highway toll receipt from that day. The hotel owner in Gyeongju also confirmed that Lee Sang-jae had stayed there. However, there were people who questioned his alibi, suggesting that he only provided receipts for the day of the disappearance and not for the other days. Nevertheless, the police could not find any direct evidence to charge Lee Sang-jae, and he was eventually removed from the list of suspects. Throughout the investigation of this shocking case, South Korean police mobilized over 10,000 personnel, compiled a list of 400 suspects, conducted more than 700 handwriting analyses, screened 28,000 potential suspects nationwide, and offered a 30 million won reward for useful information. Yet, the perpetrator remained unidentified. In January 2006, 15 years after the case occurred, the statute of limitations under South Korean law expired, and the investigation was officially closed, marking the case as an unsolved mystery. Mr. Lee Woo-shik, Lee Hyung-ho's father, lamented, "Who is the statute of limitations really protecting?" The case also fueled public outrage in South Korea, with many believing that such cases should not have a statute of limitations. A petition signed by 50,000 people was submitted to the Blue House, urging the removal of the statute of limitations for serious crimes like kidnapping and murder. The incompetence of the South Korean police during this investigation angered the public. Despite the forensic results indicating leftover food in the victim's stomach, the police failed to link it to the lunch that Lee Hyung-ho had eaten at a friend's house on the day of his disappearance. Instead of focusing on this critical lead, they wasted time searching restaurants across Songpa and Gangnam districts. Mr. Lee Woo-suk was extremely dissatisfied with the police's investigation methods. His relationship with the police became very strained. A detective involved in the case said, "I barely spoke to him." Although the case remains unsolved and the statute of limitations has expired, the South Korean public has never given up hope of discovering the truth. In 2007, the movie Voice of a Murderer, inspired by the case of Lee Hyung-ho, was released. The film reignited a wave of public debate. To make the film, the producers obtained consent from Lee Hyung-ho's biological parents. However, his stepmother, Mrs. Choi Eun-ji, did not agree. She claimed that the film defamed her image and reopened old wounds. As a result, Mrs. Choi filed a lawsuit against the producers, demanding that the film be taken down, which somewhat affected the audience's perception of the movie. At the end of the film, a recording of the kidnapper's actual voice was played, sending chills down viewers' spines. On South Korean online forums, the case of Lee Hyung-ho remains a hot topic, attracting ongoing interest and discussion. Some people believe that the perpetrator was someone close to Mrs. Choi Eun-ji, while others suggest that one of the criminals might have been an infiltrator within the police ranks. There are even suspicions that Mr. Lee Woo-suk, the victim's father, was the mastermind behind the crime. However, all these theories are mere speculation by netizens, with no concrete evidence. In 1991, the popular South Korean TV program, I Want to Know, featured a segment on the case of Lee Hyung-ho. 25 years later, in May 2011, the program revisited this heartbreaking case, conducting investigations, interviews, and inviting experts for analysis. In the program, voice analysts used the kidnapper's voice to create a new composite sketch of him. According to the police's sketch, the kidnapper had an oval face with a long chin. However, the experts suggested that he had developed muscles on both sides of his cheeks, with a short distance from the mouth to the chin. The kidnapper's pronunciation was very precise, similar to that of a news anchor. Based on this, the expert argued that with the facial structure in the police sketch, the kidnapper would not have been able to pronounce words so clearly. Therefore, the expert made slight adjustments to the sketch. Through voice and handwriting analysis, the program concluded that only one man made all the ransom calls. Variations in the voice could have been due to external factors, such as wearing a paper mask while speaking. In 2015, Mr. Lee Woo-suk agreed to an interview with the press. After his son's death, he went through an extremely difficult period, at times turning to alcohol to numb the pain. His career also faced setbacks. Fortunately, his health remained good. In 2006, he founded a construction company named Youngwoo, a combination of his name and his son's name. Reflecting on his son's personality, Mr. Lee smiled and reminisced. He was such a good boy, always lively. One time, he got into a fight before coming home. When I asked about it, I found out it was because someone was bullying his older brother. So he picked up a handful of coal and threw it at the other boy. His voice choked and tears welled up in his eyes. Even after more than 15 years, Mr. Lee has never stopped searching for the killer. The media also reached out to interview Lee Hyung-ho's biological mother. At the time of the incident, she worked closely with the police during the investigation. After her son's funeral, she turned to Buddhism, praying daily for the peace of his soul. In October 2019, the media reported that the only remaining evidence in the case, the kidnapper's voice, was being analyzed by experts using artificial intelligence technology. The police also sent the handwriting samples to the National Forensic Service for re-examination. A police officer noted, while identifying someone through voice analysis is less accurate than DNA testing, we are doing everything we can to uncover the truth. The TV program I Want to Know, which had twice previously aired segments about the case, once again played the kidnapper's voice during the October 2019 broadcast, urging the police to reopen the investigation. Host Moon Sung-koo-won delivered an emotional appeal on the program to the murderer who kidnapped and killed Hyun-ho. Are you watching this show? If you are, I want to ask you, after you killed Hyun-ho, Has his image ever appeared in your dreams? What did he say to you? If you're watching, know this. To protect our children, we will find you, and we will never forgive you. The murder of Lee Hyun-ho, along with the 5 Frog Boys case and the Wazong serial murders, are considered the 3 most shocking unsolved mysteries in South Korea. In 2019, after 33 years, the perpetrator of the Wazong murders was finally captured, reigniting hope for the remaining 2 cases. As time goes by, the case of Lee Hyun-ho continues to haunt the minds of South Koreans. The chilling laughter of the perpetrator, fragmented clues, and bizarre theories all create a veil of mystery that separates the truth from the world. Though the hope of finding the killer grows increasingly slim, Lee Hyun-ho's family and those interested in the case have never given up. They believe that justice may be delayed, but it will never be absent. As the years have passed and technology has advanced, forensic experts have continually revisited and analyzed the evidence, hoping to find new leads. The South Korean police have also established a special task force dedicated to reinvestigating unsolved cases, including the case of Lee Hyun-ho. They have applied the most modern investigative techniques and called upon the public to provide information in the hope of reopening the case. Though it may be too late and the outcome uncertain, the case of Lee Hyun-ho remains a stark reminder of the importance of justice, truth, and compassion in our lives.